Welcome to SchneiderB FM. This is the podcast to help you use the internet to market your school in order to achieve your enrollment goals. I'm your host, Brendan Schneider. This is episode 14, and my guest today is Trevor Waddington. I'm excited for today, not only because of my conversation with Trevor, but also because this marks the relaunch of SchneiderB FM. I had hosted a podcast probably 2 years ago, this podcast, and had to stop just because of time commitments, and it was just too much. But I've come back to podcasting. I enjoy the medium. I consume a ton of podcasts, and I really love the conversation, so here we are. Trevor is a school person, has worn a lot of different hats at school, and most recently has done admissions and marketing work. And this past year is now on his own. He's got a few different projects going, and I'll have links in the show notes. But our conversation really began as a response to a post in my Facebook group about a parent decision map, parent roadmap. There are lots of different names for these things. And my conversation with Trevor, we talk about that parent roadmap a little bit. We talk about value proposition. And most importantly, I think we talk about analytics, which is something that as marketers, myself included, not only do we need to prioritize and spend more time on, but we need to learn more about. But before we get started, I'd like to share a word from our sponsor. This episode of SchneiderB FM is sponsored by the VirCon 6, which is my school marketing virtual conference. The VirCon 6 will take place live on October 13th. It includes 9 school marketing experts teaching and sharing actionable tips that will help you become a better school marketer. Your registration includes access to the live presentations as well as all of the recordings. I've tried sincerely to make this conference an incredible value, because you can also share the recordings with your entire team. To see who the presenters are and their topics, please check out www.vircon6.com. That's VIRCON6.com. Hi, Trevor. Welcome to SchneiderB FM.
Brendan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy that you're here. And to get started, I was wondering if you could introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, I'm a former director of admission, communication, marketing, financial aid, like many of us who wear many hats in the admission world. And over the past few years, I've ventured out on my own and with my own company, starting with a small DC-based website called dcschoolhub.com. And from there, I branched out into, helping other admission, marketing, communications professionals with Truth Tree Consulting.
Sounds great. So just so the listener knows, every link and URL that we talk about today, we will have in the show notes. So don't feel like you have to remember anything or write anything down. So Trevor, I'm so happy to have you here today. And I want to jump into the topic, which really came about from a thread in my Facebook group, which you're a member. And someone had asked a question about a parent decision journey map. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because you answer the question. You call it something differently, but I wonder if you could unpack that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, one of my favorite things to do is read about business, and a lot of business concepts that are out there, I think, are missing us in schools, and I think could be really useful. So that decision journey, I really call what a school can do is it's their value management, and how you manage a parent or student's valuation of your experience, whether it's the program, the campus, or everything in between.
That's great. So then this might be self-explanatory, but why does that matter? Why is that important?
Well, I think especially in this day and age, it's the value that really matters. With the tuition gap and what families can afford, that gap growing, every single year, I really feel, and especially with the fact that, this generation of parents really requires that you show them that value. And I would venture to say that more so than the actual price tag is. So because there's that huge gap, schools really need to be able to manage the valuation of the experience, everything from that first inquiry, whether it's online, the first phone call, the mailer that they may get in the mail, the experience at an open house. Each one of those for different people has a different level of value. And what I've attempted to do is kind of break that down through geobehavioral psychographic data.
That's great, because I couldn't agree with you more. The value proposition
I think it's always been important, but it's becoming more and more important. So what you're saying is, I think, important to so many schools. How does a school go about creating something like this?
Well, it really is, highly individualized for each school and where they are located really in the world. For the last school I was at, we really kind of broke it down into different quadrants. So, for example, families to our south that were in Washington, D.C. proper, that typically had a higher HHI and, had, more prestigious schools when, you look at that, quadrant of prestige or no prestige and then cost, the two sides of cost. They were looking for more prestige, and frankly, they would drive downtown to work, and the school was on the way. So why get a less prestigious school to the north, where then it's going to make my commute down to work that much more? You've also have, some families in our quadrant one were more tech savvy. So those certainly would be families that would look at both your website, your mobile site. If you have an app, any social media or tech that you use, they're going to hold a higher valuation for that if you're doing a good job. Whereas someone where, that's not as important, they're going to put more value in different areas, like the experience that your child has when they come to visit. So being able to kind of unpack that and use that data to kind of overlay your sphere of reach has allowed me to create powerful and sharp enrollment projections.
Now, just to clarify, when you were first talking about a quadrant, you were talking about location in relation to school?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one more thing, if I can interrupt. And the other thing that I wanted to clarify was that when we're talking about this journey, you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, the admission process. So from that first point of contact to enrollment or to graduation or to where does that go?
Well, I'm working on the through graduation piece, but because I've been in admissions for so long, I'm taking it through enrollment. But really, the concept itself can really work through graduation because, a part of many people in admissions job is retention as well. Even though they may not have a direct link to retention, a lot of times it kind of falls in their lap. So working with, influencers in the school, whether it be teachers, administrators, or even parents that you're close to really help to continue that journey. And certainly if there's a family out there that, has had a couple of chinks in the armor as far as the school's concerned, what can you do as, a retention piece to keep that family, to keep their evaluation of the program high so they're not then going and, looking at another school. One way that I've done that is a three-pronged process in which, and I'm a big believer in getting feedback from constituency groups, but getting feedback in a compelling way, I think, is the most important piece. Okay. And what we would do in the right around contract time in the late winter is we would send out a survey to parents. We would get the data back. We would really dive deep into that data, and we would usually come out with 2, 3, or 4 things that we were going to be working on in the spring and in the summer, and then in the fall present to parents. Here's what we said we were going to do. Here's what we did all summer long, and here are the results or what's ongoing. That way, if they were a little disgruntled over the summer, they say, wow, my concerns have been met. I'm not going to go to that other school's open house next weekend.
Okay. So what I think I hear you saying, and please tell me if I'm wrong, is that this can actually permeate to all aspects of the school. Is that right?
It can. But it starts with a deep data dive into your own data, looking at, everybody from your inquiries to your applications to your, at least 5 years worth of families and what, how their decisions were molded throughout that process. You can absolutely, figure out a way to create value for them based on what you think they are going to want.
Okay. So my next question is, besides calling you to help, which is always an option, how would a school go about even getting started at this? Where do they start? What data do they look at? Stuff like that.
Well, they can start with the basic data that they have. We can sit here and debate what an inquiry is. It's really kind of hard to debate what an application is at this point, or, someone you accept or an enrollee. But whatever you determine in those areas, you want to break it down. So what I would do is break it down by zip code and then chunk those zip codes based on, distance from your school and distance. So it's really just a matter of, where they lie, where they are, and, how you can capture them. So a lot of that also has to do with political leanings, if you're a more conservative school, if you're a more liberal school, if what your outcomes are, where your kids go to high school. For some families, that's an important piece of it. For others, it's not. And it may be influenced on, where they live and who they surround themselves with.
So the next question for me would be, once we look at our data and kind of determine geographically and otherwise, who our audience is, what do we do with that? How does that affect how we market or attract kids?
That's a really good question. And that's really where it comes down to that messaging that I always find in the survey data. A lot of times we want to come up with these really cool taglines, and they may be really cool, but are they messages that are resonating with the right people? So what I like to do, with Google Ads or with Facebook is target specific groups of people, again, based on that psychographic geobehavioral data, using mission appropriate messaging. And then when you deliver that in this day and age in real time or, within a couple days, you can determine whether an ad is effective or not. And Google can even do it for you. If you have 4 or 5 ads going to a specific group and it determines that this one has been the most effective because it's been the most clicked on, and they'll push that ad more. But you can look at that information and then say, wow, this is the language that is resonating with these people. This is the one that has, this is the call to action that has produced the most attendees at our open houses. But again, it's a long haul piece. It's something that needs to be measured and researched over a long period of time. I think the one thing I'll always recommend to schools is, don't try something once, and then if it falls flat, don't try it again. You want to build on it, not restart it. And then when you find something that works and you get sick of it, then people are really listening to it. And that's when the messaging is really at its best.
Okay, so a couple thoughts. Now, were you doing the Google ads and Facebook ads, or did you have somebody help you do that?
No, I was doing it.
You're doing it. Okay. So you and I speak the same geek language, and I use that term affectionately. So you did this for your school, right? You didn't sub any of this out.
Yep.
Okay. So
no. One house.
That's why you and I get along, because we think alike there. And what I've heard from people when I've talked in the past is they go, Brendan's doing that. He's crazy. I can't do that. And I want you to fight back. So if somebody says to me, Trevor's doing this stuff, he's into data, which really I think all, especially admission offices, should be using more and more if they're not. Can you allay people's fears that anybody could do this, or even talk about where you started to where you are now?
Sure. Well, the great thing about Google Ads, now it's ads, it used to be AdWords, is that you can make $25 mistakes. You can, create an ad and have it fall flat on its face and lose $25. I think with Google Ads, there's just so much information to learn. There are so many portals. There's so many rabbit holes just within, the framework of what you see in front of you. I spent a lot of time. I probably spent 80, 90, 100 hours, reading the tutorials. And of course, the first time not understanding them. So yeah. It was really 50 hours times 2. The second time I understood them a little bit better. And then the other part is Google wants you to use their ads because they're making money from it. So the people on their end that you can speak to, the customer service people, have been great to me. There were times where I would be on the phone with them 2-3 times a week, seeing if I was doing things right. Between those two things, it just does take time. I see them continuing to benefit schools if used correctly. So, I would just say, you can go to YouTube. I'm sure there's a YouTube video of how to get started with it, a little bit of the ins and outs. You can give me a call. Maybe you can give Brendan a call.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And for people that still might be a little hesitant after hearing your explanation, which I think is spot on, is that the work that we do enrolling students, you have to start to understand these things. Start to learn, or at least, split up parts with people in your office to split the workload. But people have to start to understand this. So question, with the work that you're doing and talking about here with data and really in this work of testing messages, have you had more success, or do you recommend schools jump in with Google Ads or with Facebook Ads?
That's a good question.
If they had to pick one. If they had
to pick one, I would go with Google Ads, because I think people don't come to Facebook saying, wow, the first school that someone talks about, recommends, or tags. I'm going to look at for my child. They go to Google when they've decided that, it's time to look for an independent school. And, their heavy searches now are schools, private schools near me, independent schools near me. It's trending now more towards families want the best. So what's trending now is best, top 50, top 5. And, I think it's from there that you start to lay the groundwork of whatever impression you want to lay upon someone when they see your ad. One of the things I always tell colleagues and clients is that one is you don't need to have your name at the top of your Google ad. You want to have a benefit. And once they're like, wow, I love this benefit. Oh, this happens to be, Sawicki Academy or whatever school it happens to be. Because if they see the name, like, oh, I've heard of that school, and then underneath it says small classes and one-on-one attention, like, well, that's what I'm looking for, obviously, but every school has that. So yeah. I think, that's one of the big things with Google Ads is to just, even if you don't get it, just jump on, put a $2 down per day and check it in 3 days. You spent $6 and you can see your, 150 impressions, 2 clicks. I keep hearing that a 2.0 click-through rate for more of an impression piece is about par for the course. And then, about a 2.5 to 3 click-through rate is, more of a call to action. But of course that's all dependent upon who you're targeting. And I think where, I've found some success is the micro-targeting those groups in certain neighborhoods with the right messaging. Because if you're targeting a right message and you put it at the top like, hey, Bethesda mom, and they're like, hey, how did you know I was a Bethesda mom? I'm intrigued. I'm going to click here. And then, hopefully they continue the journey through your website to find intriguing information to then, make that call, send that email to inquire about the school.
Great. And as we work towards wrapping up and kind of, I think, close the loop a little bit. If you use data and you're testing your messages, let's say that you put 4 ads on Google and one is clearly the winner in terms of resonating with that geography or that targeting. Do you then take that messaging and put that in other areas of your marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. Because even if, again, I don't see it as wasted money. What I try to do is see how much or how little or how much more does that message resonate with this other group of people. When I first started, I had no kids, no wife. Now I have a wife, 2 lovely daughters, ages 6 and 3. So I am part of, the target audience, and I know it a little bit more, but I know enough to know that I am not all knowing in this. So, I may have a hunch that this is going to work, but, the data doesn't lie.
Great. Trevor, this has been great. Where can people find, or where should they look for you online? Where's the best place to find you?
Well, you can find me at truthtreeconsulting.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook as well. Or, certainly just go to the website, give me a call, and we can have a great conversation like you and I had just now, Brendan.
Sounds great. Trevor, thank you. Can't thank you enough for being here.
Great. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. But before you go, can I ask a favor? I would love for you to leave an honest review of this show on iTunes. Reviews are the way that more people can find the show and we can get the word out and we can help more people market their school. I've made it easy for you, so if you go to SchneiderB.com/iTunes, it'll take you right where you need to leave the review. So thanks very much, and until next episode.